Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 23 of Cool Story with David J. McNeil. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support. This episode features a chat with the one and only Erica M. If you grew up in Canada in the 1980s and 90s, you know who Erica is. And back in the day, I was a mega fan of Erica's. I loved music, and I watched as much music as humanly possible. That television station formed me in a big way and guided a lot of the choices I made as a broadcaster. In fact, in the mid-90s, I sent then director of music programming Denise Donlin my reel in a rubber boot, or Wellington, full of those little red gummies shaped like little red feet, talking about how badly I wanted to get my foot in the door at Much Music as a VJ. Denise later kindly responded saying that I would not be considered for an upcoming VJ position, unfortunately, which I already knew, frankly, because I really was not ready for primetime. She then asked me if I'd like her to send my welly back, which I replied would not be necessary. I wish at the time that I shared with her a personal connection that we had, which was that Denise's husband, singer-songwriter Murray McLaughlin, used to play in a band with my Uncle Jacques, who died in his early 20s. But that is a whole other story for another day. But our story, the Erica and Dave story, isn't a new one. In fact, this is the third time I've chatted with the wonderful Ms. Erica M., going back to 1991. And then we spoke again a few short years later, when she toured with her new book, She Should Talk, which we discussed in this episode. Erica M. is a person who has done an awful lot of heavy lifting in the world of pop culture and self-help. That's why it was once again, for the third time, such a distinct pleasure for me to have Erica share some of her time with me. So please welcome Erica M. Hey, Erica, how are you?
Great, thank you.
I'm so happy that we're chatting today. I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a little while. We've been back and forth on Instagram trying to plan something, but sounds like you're a pretty busy person, especially with your own podcast these days.
Yeah, it is way more work than I even imagined. I had no idea that doing a podcast took so much time.
Yeah, reinvention of the VJ. You've come full circle, and you're sort of looking back at your years at Much and chatting with all of your former colleagues. How's that experience been so far?
Well, it's been surprisingly incredible. You know, a lot of people have been asking me to do a podcast, and everybody was suggesting that I do something about motherhood because of, my website, ymc.ca, my digital marketing agency that's just about moms, which is called M & Co. And I just did not want to do it, but been immersed in the world of motherhood for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I feel like in many ways it's been done. And what I heard is if you're going to do a podcast, you need to do something that only you can do. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, I have this unique insight into what it was like to be behind the scenes at Much Music. Now, there are many other people who have a similar insight. However, I also have a very strong desire to talk about reinvention and to share stories of people who took something that they were given, which in this case would have been a job at Much Music. And then how do they take what was such a powerful position and move on in life, sometimes because of Much Music or sometimes despite Much Music. I also had shut the door on Much Music for several years when I left because it defined me so much, and in fact still does. I wanted to put space between me and it. So I really turned down opportunities to speak about it on many occasions. And I just wanted to focus on the future. And I feel now, over the years, I've proven that I am more than just that girl on Much Music. And certainly that Much Music didn't make me. Erica made me. I made myself. Much Music gave me an amazing platform, but I put the work into it. So I was ready to go back. Right. And when I said that the experience was surprisingly incredible, the reconnection with a lot of these people who I worked with so closely for many years, and the connection with many of the people I never met before who came after me on Much has been sort of remarkable. I feel like an immediate kinship with almost every single person that I spoke with. And I know the feeling was mutual. When you hear the conversations, we just talk and we tell stories and we open up and we have, I think, really meaningful conversations. So I'm really proud of it. And it reminds me also not just about the strong connection that I had with people who worked at Muchmusic, but just how much I love the art of interviewing and getting people to tell their stories. And as we're speaking, my dog is attacking my legs. So I'm multitasking right here.
Well, that's a podcast, right? You gotta get it done no matter what the obstacles are that happen in your house. This is actually the third time I've chatted with you. First time was in 1991, I think. And I was a reporter for the University of Ottawa's television show called TV Zoom. And my girlfriend at the time, who worked with me, Leanne, she organized a trip and we went down to Toronto and we got to come into the Muchmusic environment and we interviewed you, Master T, Dan Gallagher, and I think that was it that day. But it was such a hustle and bustle environment. It was so fun to be there. It was exciting. And, as a young person working in TV, we all wanted to, maybe we'll get a chance to work there one day. And so that was really exciting. And then I met you a couple years later and you were on a book tour. You were touring with your book. I think you were doing two things at once. I think you were doing a tour with UNICEF and you had just written a book called She Should Talk. And so I met you in a theater somewhere. We did an interview there and you signed my book and wished me well for my career in broadcasting. And then here we are the third time around. So it's really nice to chat with you. And I have been listening to your podcast. It's great. I've listened to the interview you did with Jeannie Becker, Steve Anthony, and then Rick Campanelli, who was actually on the podcast as well. I chatted with him back in December, and he was telling me some stories and telling me how much your work there had inspired him when he started working at Muchmusic. And so he had nothing but great things to say about you and your work. So that was a really cool experience. And it's been cool to listen to your stories and the VJ stories about what it was like to work there back in the day. Just kind of pull the curtain back and hear those great stories. Mm-hmm. So you said that for a long time you didn't really want to talk about that so much. You'd put it behind you. But that's a difficult thing to do when you're Erica M and you go out every single day and people want to stop and ask you about that, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Well, I talk about when people come up to me, I would certainly talk about it because I understand that I have a responsibility. I was given this incredible opportunity. And I also really appreciate when people want to talk to me about Muchmusic or about what I'm doing now or about anything. I think that's, where people say, well, to whom much is given, much is expected or something like that. So if someone tweets me, emails me, whatever, I usually respond because that's just part of the job.
Mm-hmm. And what is it that you take from that era of your career working at Muchmusic? What is it that you learned the most from working in that environment? And because that was all new. You guys were inventing something as it was happening. Moses Neimer was, you guys were. Now we see that kind of style, a looser style of interview and stuff in the news even and everywhere. But at the time, nobody else was doing anything like that. Mm-hmm. What do you take from that era that really kind of marks you or set you up for what you do today?
Everything. I think everything that I do today stems back from something that I learned at Muchmusic. It taught me to be quick on my feet and speak in the media. So I learned an incredible skill. And when social media started, I was way ahead of the game because I understand how to communicate personally and yet to a mass audience at the same time. Mm-hmm. I understand how to build community for Muchmusic because I don't think we speak enough about how Muchmusic made you feel like you were part of something. We spoke to you and you felt like you were on the inside. And I did that with Mums, the same thing. And in fact, I didn't even realize that I was doing it. And then one day I had that aha moment and said, wow, everything that I learned at Much, I'm now applying to creating an equally inspiring and innovative, compelling community for moms. I also learned how to do research. I learned how to interview, and I learned how to stand up for myself, because I, on many occasions, was pushed around, or people tried to push me around, be it my bosses or fans or bands. And I learned to stand my ground and to have nerves of steel and a backbone, which has served me really well.
Yeah, I remember watching some afternoons where a band would come in and they'd start to, they'd be pushing and prodding and seeing, how far they could get with you. And you really kind of stood your ground and pushed back. And especially in those days too, it was still permissible or acceptable for like a rock band to show up half in the bag, and then you've got to deal with that. Not only is the band pushy and that kind of thing, but they're also, high or a little bit drunk or whatever. So there was situations where I remember watching you dealing with bands and really pushing back. So that's definitely something that you don't see on TV these days. I mean, it just wouldn't fly.
I got to tell you something. I am not a fan of people who are high or drunk. It just turns me off. All that I can think of is, man, loser. Still to this day, it just turns me off.
Yeah.
So it was easy to push back because I lost respect for them. So they were not important. I didn't have to impress them. Mm-hmm. And I knew that they were going to make absolute fools of themselves. So I was doing them a favor by, shutting them down. Also, we dealt with a lot of misogyny back then, still do. But at the time, it was really overt, the way that a lot of the bands would talk to me and other women who were on Muchmusic. And yes, we all have backbones and we all shut them down, but it was okay. It shouldn't have been me. It should have been a producer who walks in and says, that's not how you speak to people. And This interview is over. They would do that today.
Yeah, for sure.
But back then, no, we had to stand up for ourselves. And again, I had no problem talking to bands about how they spoke about women or treated women or speaking to me. And I think that I am still like that today.
I mean, that's changed, but how much do you think it's changed?
Well, it hasn't changed that much. I mean, as we're seeing in the news on a daily basis with the Me Too movement, it's not easy to be a woman. Mm-hmm. And everything is quiet, meaning the stuff that happens to women is often when no one else is around.
Right. Yeah.
So it's hard. Now the courts are starting to believe the women. But in the past, if you came forward with any kind of accusation of someone being inappropriate, the men who ran the companies, the broadcasters, traditionally run by men, would, say, come on, suck it up. You can handle it. Just forget about it. They didn't mean anything.
Was there ever any chat after some of those interviews where producers said to you, you kind of push pretty hard, you might want to be a little bit easier on bands if they kind of pull that crap, or was it just you be you?
I never got feedback on anything I did ever.
Really?
When I worked at Muchmusic, they gave me an incredible platform. They gave me a camera. They gave me a microphone. And they gave me 3 minutes before each set of videos to say whatever I wanted. And that was it. I never got feedback on my work. I never got help. I never had a researcher. I never had a writer. I never had a teleprompter.
Never had Google.
No Google.
Yeah.
No. That was, you had to, go through industry magazines. There was no internet at the time. There was no wardrobe person. Near the end of my time there, they did have a makeup artist. There was no hair person. Essentially, there was nothing you would expect from a national broadcaster. And I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay with it because it ties back to what have I learned? Well, I learned how to do all of that because no one did it for me. And that was actually a gift. And, you know, when you look at someone like J.D. Roberts or now John Roberts, who is one of the most respected political reporters now down south, a lot of the skills that he learned, or really all the skills he learned while being on Much Music and the New Music. That's where he learned his journalism. That's where he learned all the skills. And again, he was like a one-man machine. And usually when you have a big name broadcaster, they don't know how to do all the other jobs. They just know how to be a great host.
Yeah.
But we are like master, what is it? Jack of all trades and master of everything.
Right. Yeah. It's true. You know, you mentioned talking about being a reporter, a journalist. Your era of Much Music, the people that work there were very much rock journalists. And you could have taken so many of the people that you worked with, including yourself, and plonked them down at Rolling Stone or New Music Express or Spin Magazine, and they would have been great rock journalists. They did that, you know, there was that quality kind of after you had left. It was more about, it was more of a corporate thing, and there wasn't as much time to discuss, right? You kind of had to come in and throw more.
I'm going to interrupt for a second and say, first of all, when I left in 94, I shut Much Music off and I never turned it on.
Yeah.
So I'm not speaking from firsthand knowledge.
Yeah.
What I can tell you, though, is when I left was when Denise Donlin took over. And by the way, you should listen to that interview with her, which is 2 weeks ago. I launched that interview with Denise Donlin. So she started off as one of the on-air hosts, and she worked her way up to basically running Much Music. And she brought something to Much, which was way more journalistic than when I was there. She was all about social justice and telling stories with context and having discussions about videos and violence and sex and misogyny and having almost academic conversations around videos. So there was an era, which was right after I left. And then I'm not sure how long it went because I was not watching, where Much Music was even more relevant than it first was. And the on-air hosts that they chose, like Jen Hollett, for example, Nam, these women were and are Hannah Sung. They're all journalists and are earnest and hardworking and serious, and they love music. They loved pop culture, but they, I think, elevated the discussion. George Strombo, another example.
Yeah, for sure.
Those guys were all different than us. Of course, no one's going to compare it to the original because everybody loves the original because it was loose and etc. And we all did a good job. But the generation right after me, they were kick-ass, and they mattered. I think what happened after that group is when it started to get pop culture and commercial, celebrity-driven as opposed to issue-driven. The music mattered less. What people wore mattered more. The hosts became younger and less knowledgeable about music, but super cute, you know, and that served a purpose in a way because they wanted to attract a younger audience. Remember, this is all about making money. And it's true that as myself and all the other hosts, we got older, our interests evolve. And I am assuming that the bean counters at Bell or CTV or whoever it was that was owning was looking at the demographic and thinking, well, our audience is probably shifting, so we have to change our strategy. As opposed to the idea of audience retention, they just said, see ya, and we're going to go off after a different audience. So what happened was they lost their community and they never found a new one to replace it.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I was referencing, and that I think it kind of that era mirrored what was going on in radio as well, right? It was the end of the era of freeform radio and DJs coming on and chatting, picking their own music and chatting.
Well, that was already not happening. Like when I was working at Shom, which was when I was 17, that was still sort of loose radio, but I remember that they had all the American radio, big shots who were coming in and picking the music and tightening things up and, playing less music over and over again. So right. I think that by the time Much Music had started, it in fact was refreshing because radio was already becoming more and more limited. There were a few stations who were sort of rebel stations that played music that mattered, but for the most part, these were top 40 stations, and it was hard to get an independent station and music. And Much Music was kind of like old-fashioned FM radio because we played everything and it was eclectic, and we didn't look to other people to see what to play. We played, apparently, because I wasn't part of the music committee, but what I understand is they played what they liked.
One of the things that was really interesting about the Much Music phenomenon and television in general, but specifically Much Music, and Rick and I were talking about this, it wasn't like today where there's just a million things to watch all at once. And back then there were so many people, so many young people that would tune in, especially if they knew a big band was coming in, or even more so if there was a video that was going to drop that was like, I remember there'd be a ticker on the screen for 2 weeks because Michael Jackson's Black or White was coming out, or, and it was an event, and people would be talking about it at school. Kids would be talking about it at school. This is going to happen on Friday and you should come over after school and we're all going to watch it together. And that was such a community situation, right? Where now people they go to where they know their music is. It was like a focus point just to be there to watch that happen.
Well, we were Canadian music curators. We were the epicenter of Canadian culture for many, many years. And what has happened as Much Music dissolved, the media has become more and more splintered in general. So the problem is, who is your curator? There are no more curators. What there are a bunch of tiny little outlets. Everybody has their own voice, which is lovely that the media has been democratized and everybody could be a so-called influencer or expert. That's great, because the mainstream broadcasters shouldn't own the voice. But because of that, we've lost something, which is a national voice. CBC, I guess you could say, would be that for Canadians. I don't know how good a job they do. I don't think that they have built a community feel like Much Music. And I feel like it still has it says CBC, it has a corporate voice because it's a corporate entity. So there is no sort of hipster curator anymore where my kids can find music. So they're going on Spotify and Pandora and whatever, trying to find tunes, but there's nowhere for them, and there's no one person or people. There's not a group of people that they can look to for what's cool. Sad.
Yeah, no, it is very different. One thing I was surprised by, I had no idea until I started, really delving into your career a bit more. I had no idea that you were a songwriter. And then I see that you've won several awards for your songwriter, SOCAN Awards, Canadian Country Music Awards. When did you start writing music? Was that something you did very young, or was that something that you picked up later?
No, it was something that I only dreamt about. I mean, come on, to be the person who makes the music and not just talk about it. I didn't even think it was possible because I'm not a musician and I have no relative pitch. So I'm the furthest thing from a musician. What I loved about music was always the voice and the stories and the lyrics and the melodies. Those are the things that I listen to for music. I didn't really understand, and still don't understand, how instruments work and how they create mood, etc. I just don't know that. So what happened was I had asked the boss at Chum, which was the owner of Much Music and City TV, for a raise, because I discovered that I was making significantly less money than all the men who were doing the same job as me. On one hand, I understand it because I was the new kid, but after 4 years, I wasn't the new kid anymore, and I was getting the most mail. So I went up to him with all the stats. I had my whole story. This is why I think I need this raise. And he said, but you're difficult to work with. So I responded in a way that I'm not necessarily that proud of. I basically said, fuck you, I quit. Exactly in those words. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget it. And he looked at me, but, and I got up and I went, fuck off. And I stormed out and I quit. So the other bosses, the ones who work under him, must have been calling me, but I never answered my phone. I called my friend Tim Thorney, who is a songwriter, and he's a really great jingle producer, and I was doing a lot of voiceovers for him. So I called him up in tears and saying, oh my God, I quit my job. I love my job. So he said, Emmy, can you write a song? I was like, I don't know. He said, come on over. We'll see what we can do. So we wrote a song together. It was called Your Place in the World. And it wasn't bad. Emmy, let's do another one. And we ended up becoming songwriting partners for over a decade.
Wow.
We wrote about 300 songs together, and we started a record label together, and we found artists, wrote entire albums for them, and then put them out on our label, which was distributed by Sony. And it was a really special time in my life. Tim and I had something incredibly special. We were able to sit down in a room, and one of us would come up with an idea, either musical or lyrical, and we would walk out with a song. And I never counted words. A lot of people do that. I wrote 42% of the song or whatever. Everything was 50-50. And I don't even remember the process. We were so in the moment that we would just sit there, and we trusted each other. We both had respect for each other. And we walked out with songs that I still love today.
And so was that did you end up sticking with much at that point, or did you end up reconciling, or is that when you actually decided to
that
part
story.
ways?
Who cares about Muchmusic? No, I'm just kidding. So about 5 days later, I finally answered. Maybe it was 4 days. Maybe it was 3 days. I don't remember. The phone rang. I answered it, and it was John Martin, who was, my boss, not the top boss. And he was like, Erica, come on, come back to work. And I said, I want that raise. He said, fine, we'll give you the raise. Just come back. So I got the raise, and I had a whole new songwriting career that was incredibly meaningful for years and years.
Right. So that was kismet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you decide that you want to move on. Were you, after you left Muchmusic, were you scared? Did you have any idea what you were going to do next beyond the songwriting work? Did you know that you wanted to work in television again?
Well, I knew that I had all the skills to work in television, and I knew that there was interest in me working in television because, when you're on air for a decade doing live TV every single day, not to mention interviews around the world, etc., you just pick up skills. And I had a name. So I wasn't really afraid about getting another job. And when I was working at Muchmusic, another thing that I learned, which I have since applied to the businesses that I run, is Muchmusic told me, or my bosses, the producers, whatever, I was told on many occasions, to mind my P's and Q's because I was replaceable. So, watch your back.
Right.
And when someone tells you that, you kind of pull back a little. And there's a thing inside that says, man, I better protect myself, because what happens if tomorrow they decide I'm going to be replaced?
Sure.
So I stopped giving them my heart, and I started looking elsewhere while I was working at Much. And the way I did that is I planted seeds for many different things. So I had a hat company, and I had my songwriting business, and I wrote a book called She Should Talk.
Yes.
So when you saw me, I had just left Muchmusic. And that's how I left Much, was with the release of a book, which to me was a statement for me, which is, this is the direction that I want to go in, which is having powerful conversations for women by women. And I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah. And then you became a mother. And then what made you decide that that you wanted to reach out to other moms and have a whole new chapter, being a mentor for other moms? I don't know if that's the way to put it, but what made you think that was something that other moms needed?
When I had kids, I struggled. I was, as they say, the worst mom on the planet. I dropped my son once when I was putting him into the little baby holder. I mean, I was depressed. I was fat. I was sad. I was isolated, and I felt really useless. I had my son late. I was 39 when I had my son. Most of my friends didn't have kids, so I didn't have any experience even holding kids. So when I was invited many years later, like 3 years later, I saw someone at an event and she said, "Would you want to host a show? What would it be?" And I said, "I want to do a show called Yummy Mummy, which is about the roller coaster of modern motherhood, where we celebrate and commiserate the realities of modern motherhood." The problem was, I found when I became a mom, is that everybody looks at my kid or kids. My God, how are they doing? How are they? Are they healthy? Nobody is asking, how am I?
Right.
Well, that's troubling because mothers are struggling. It's a really hard job. And everybody just assumes that motherhood comes naturally. You're just a natural mom. You'll figure it out. Well, that's not actually true. You don't just figure it out. You need people teaching you. We don't live in a village anymore. So we're isolated. And I thought, if I'm struggling, and I'm a capable woman, I'm a very capable woman. I rocked Muchmusic, but I'm struggling here. And I said, why is no one talking about this? So it kind of became my mission, to speak up on behalf of moms and to say, it's okay to say you're struggling. It's okay to take time for yourself. It's not guilt-free time. It's you need it time. And I built now I guess you call it my empire, ymc.ca, which is based on the premise that, moms can have it all, just not at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that Yummy Mummy is a state of mind. It means that you have more to your life than your kids, that you may have a career, or you may have a hobby, or you may just be like super fit or something that isn't necessarily connected to your kids, and to not feel guilty for it. It's a going concern. It's still one of Canada's largest platforms for moms. And I built a whole business around it, always women at the center of it. It's a company and a website and a platform for moms, by moms.
I've read an article the other day, seen a lot of pieces on the news talking about how it's really difficult for moms right now, especially during COVID, because, there's so much more that you need to do. Your kids are at home, you're homeschooling, all that. There's so much pressure. So resources like that are more important than ever.
Yeah, we in fact did a survey. So my agency is called M & Co. And M & Co. is sort of the in-between between brands and moms. That's my business. Mm-hmm. And it was really important for our clients to understand how moms are feeling right now, because if you're going to market to moms, which moms like to be marketed to, by the way, because they like new products and services, but you do not want to misstep right now. You need to understand how moms are feeling in order to speak to moms with respect. And so we sent out a survey to 700 Canadian moms, and the results were actually pretty shocking, that only 7% of moms said that they're doing okay.
Right.
That's not a good number.
No.
And I think it's something, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but something like 78% of moms are anxious and stressed about their kids' mental and physical well-being.
Sure.
That's a huge pressure. 30% of moms are worried about paying their bills. And that survey was done 30 days ago or 45 days ago now. I'm sure that number is higher because more and more women are dropping out of their jobs because their kids are home and there's no one to be with the kids. They don't have help. So, and also people are being fired right, left, and center now because companies like Bell are slashing jobs. So there is incredible external stress on moms. There is no help, no domestic help. Kids are there 24/7. Moms don't have time that is their own to catch their breath. They are struggling with working. So of the women, 50% of the moms that we spoke to, 50% of them are working from home right now. And they're managing their kids' education at the same time, which is impossible.
Yeah.
How can you do a full-time job while another full-time job is in front of you? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So we realized that this information is important to get out to mainstream media. And I think the extra layer here is that employers, HR people need to understand the statistics that women are really struggling. Like not just, oh, they're having a hard time. No, this has never happened in recent history, the regression of women's roles. And so I believe that companies need to manage their expectations on their employees' productivity right now when they're working from home. They need to be much more flexible and certainly more compassionate towards women these days.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much the workplace changes, what the pandemic has done and how people have been forced to work from home, men and women. It'll be interesting to see how many people go back to the workplace, how many people are working from home and how people's lives change in that regard. I've been talking about this on the podcast because I think a lot of people are going to be able to do what my wife, Belinda, and I have done, and that is to work remotely and not only just not work from home, but work from anywhere.
And I think that's true. And hopefully in the near future, assuming that people are going to, get vaccines in arms, and as the pandemic starts to burn out, the kids will be back in school, back having a normal life. And then parents can work from home, but still have breathing room. Mm-hmm. The problem right now is that they're working from home and the kids are home. So I do believe that there will be a shift, and I think it's going to be a great one for people who want to work from home or remotely, as you're saying. It's going to save companies a lot of money, and it saves people time, no more commuting, the cost of commuting. And if they figure out how to be productive, my company, M&Co and YMC, both of them have been virtual companies. We never had an office. So for 15 years, we've managed to collaborate on sort of complex opportunities over the years with many different people. We figured out ways to do it. And now the technology is so much better. There really is not a lot of reason for many people to go back into the office on an ongoing basis. Doesn't make sense anymore.
No.
So this pandemic is literally changing the future of the world.
To those moms who, I guess in a lot of places, the kids have gone back to school. In Ontario, my nephew and niece just went back to school the other day. I don't have kids myself, but I know that, there's been the attempt for the kids to go back and then, sort of a back and forth as the lockdown has been lifted. For moms who are being stretched, who are being asked to do so much these days and having a hard time, what advice would you give them on trying to deal with all that?
Well, I guess the only advice I can give is speak up. And tell people when you're struggling, and especially if you have a partner, ensure that your partner is doing an equal share of the work. And there's a lot of women who are single right now. Mm-hmm. And this is so hard because, it's hard enough being a single parent. Imagine if you can't get any help.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing about some families who are sort of bubbling together where, they're just pretending to be one family and moms are helping each other and the kids are able to spend time together and make it work. But, I can't give advice for something like this because there is no advice. I think the only thing I could say is get freaking vaccinated, man.
Yeah.
When the opportunity arises, there has been extensive research done on this vaccine. And the alternative is so much worse.
Yeah.
So I keep on saying the research shows that these vaccines are safe. And every day that passes, there are all these committees whose job it is to note any kind of, what is it called? I don't know the actual word for it, but when something happens that is out of the ordinary in terms of symptoms after you get the vaccine, it is so low. The side effects are so low. And the upside is so high that I just hope that moms do the right thing. I know that moms just want to protect their families. I understand that. And right now it's hard because there is no research on the vaccine for kids. Mm-hmm. So parents can't decide yet, yes, I'm going to vaccinate my family because the research isn't available yet. But
and there's so much disinformation as well out there.
There is so much disinformation. But for parents, for the adults in the family, for anyone over 16 years old, get vaccinated. Because
Absolutely.
The more people that are vaccinated, the harder it is for this vaccine to find a host, to be transmissible. And then it can't spread the same way. And it protects your family at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge proponent of this vaccine. I want to get out of prison. And, some families are saying, well, I'm just going to wait for everybody else to get vaccinated. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Everybody has to do it.
Yeah. You got to be part of the solution, not just a benefactor at the end.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was talking to my brother the other day, and we were chatting about sort of how his family has dealt with the pandemic and sort of some of the things that they've started to do that have helped them. But one of the things that I love is that my brother bought a turntable, and they've been rediscovering vinyl with the kids. And they've been sort of looking at Rolling Stone's top 500 list of albums and purchasing albums. And I got excited. So I started sending them some albums that I found online, some of my favorite albums. And his kids are discovering those albums now. And he said the whole family's been involved in this. And they'll just put on the album, and the kids will lie and flip through the album artwork and read as they listen to these albums. And he said it's been such a great experience. It's been a bonding experience with the kids. It's been fun for him to revisit vinyl again, which a lot of people are doing. It's the only and the best-selling form of a hard form of music. That's all that is left now is vinyl, which is amazing. But he said it's just been a wonderful, wonderful thing to rediscover vinyl with his kids, and the kids love it. So I thought that was a really cool story. Well,
what's interesting is in my survey, that is the silver lining. Their parents did tell us that 42% of moms said that they're bonding more with their family, and they're actually grateful that their scheduling and all the extracurriculars and the crazy days have disappeared. They like that, that living slowly, and they are loving the fact that they're spending way more time with their families and actually bonding. Even the teenagers are coming out of their rooms or their lairs or their basements and connecting with their families because they can't hang out with their friends. Yeah. So all of us with teenagers are sort of in the corners, sort of applauding quietly because they can't go out partying. They're safe at home and they're communicating with us. And what your brother is doing is a great example of using the time to build special memories. And I do think that a lot of us are going to have hopefully some really great memories of this as we all slow down.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the, sort of, almost not quite, but a little bit similar to, sort of wartime stories when families had to hunker down and just had to rely on each other.
I think this is exactly like wartime.
Yeah.
I think it's exactly the same thing. And the pressure on women is the same.
Yeah.
Because men would go off to war and the women had to go into work, but also take care of their kids at the same time with not a lot of money. So I think that there's a lot of similarities between that and now, then and now. Also, the fear and anxiety are huge. And also remember, people are dying.
Yeah.
Like, this is a heartbreaking time for so many people. And I think that the numbers are comparable to the number of people dying to wars.
I was watching MSNBC the other night, and they said that when the number had gone over 450,000 dead in the U.S., that surpassed the number of Americans that were killed in the Second World War. So.
Get vaccinated.
Yeah, it's astounding. It's astounding. It really is. I wanted to mention something to you regarding Yummy Mummy. And that was yesterday I put out a note on Facebook saying that I was going to be chatting with you today. And people started making comments about that. And one of them was from a friend of mine, Nima DeCarli. She went to broadcast school with me. And she says, oh, I think she's great. I met her at a baby show, of all places, when I was pregnant with my son, Jack. She was promoting a channel called the Yummy Mummy Club. Mm-hmm. I walked by her booth and she said, hey, you look like a yummy mummy. I'm like, thanks, Erica, but look at the size of my ankles. And then she gave me some really cool stuff to take home. So there you go.
True. I don't remember that particular situation, but I met so many amazing moms at these baby shows, which are now not happening. Those were very surreal because everybody had a big belly. So it was a really surreal vision of all these women with big bellies walking around. They were the majority of people in that room.
I guess you probably did a lot of those types of shows then.
Yeah, I did it every year for like 10 years, maybe twice a year.
I also got a lot of notes from people saying that, women saying that they wanted to be like you after watching you on Much and how much they appreciated you. One of my friends' wives, Nancy Griffiths Churchill, said when I was in high school, my dream was to be like Erica M. I wanted to be a Muchmusic VJ. And then she said later she interviewed my husband, Darren, or soon to be husband, Darren Churchill, who was at the time in a band from Newfoundland called Young Saints.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah. And then I got another note from another friend. I think I mentioned to you this before, a fellow by the name of Mike Aucoin, who I went to high school with. And he was telling me that small world, Erica bought our house it was a number 27. I won't say the street. And then a few years later, when we moved to Montreal, he said that they stabled their horse with your parents.
This is true. It's 27 Mackenzie Crescent.
Yeah.
I lived there while I worked at Muchmusic. And then I moved and I bought a house with my husband after Muchmusic. So that is true.
And then, small world too, about the horse, storing the horse with your folks too. But I got lots of notes like that. The comment that came up the most was how many people, and this won't surprise you because people tell you this all the time, was watching you in those early days, that how much they were inspired by you. Mostly a lot of women talking about how that they wanted to be like you. And then I think for a lot of young men too, they were kind of watching you and other VJs and trying to figure out what kind of ladies do I like? What kind of girls? What kind of types of girls? What kind of interests that women have? What resonates with me? When young people are sort of trying to figure out who they are.
I was I don't know if you'll get this reference, but I was not Ginger. I was Marianne. Does that mean anything to you?
Yes, very much so.
That was from the TV show Gilligan's Island. And Marianne was sort of the happy, perky brunette.
Right.
Not the sexy redhead, the slinky, sexy one. That wasn't me.
Right.
She was more of a tomboy.
Right.
So I related more to her.
Yeah, I hear you. You know what? I used to. I grew up in Ottawa, and I'm bilingual. My mom's French Canadian. My dad was not French Canadian, and so while I was watching Much, I was also watching Musique Plus, which was also a great service, and that was a lot of fun watching that as well. I really enjoyed some of the people who worked over there. Claude Rajette was one of them. And then,
Natalie Richard is the guest this week on Reinvention of the VJ. So she tells a lot of stories from behind the scenes at Musique Plus.
Yeah, because she also worked at Much as well, right?
That's right.
For quite a while. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tune in for that one.
You'll tune in for all of them.
I will tune in for all of them. I will. You know what? I really enjoyed the one with Jeannie Becker, because she was right there at the beginning of the new music with JD. And she really was, she's a pioneer. And just watching her career and getting into fashion, and in full circle on the other end of it, she becomes a designer herself, seen her in so many other things. That was really interesting. And yeah, I'm going to have to check out all of them. Like I said, I've listened to a few of them so far, and I suggest that listeners check out Reinvention of the VJ, because especially fans of yours, fans of Much Music back in the day, will really be able to, like I said earlier, kind of pull the curtain back and see what it was like for all of you people working behind the scenes.
For me, I love getting people sending me comments or feedback, and a lot of people are posting reviews on the Apple Podcast app. And someone wrote my favorite thing, or one of my favorite quotes, which was, "Came for the stories, left with ideas."
Cool.
And that was the intention of the show, is to have all these great conversations, but to discuss the concept of reinvention and to make sure that people who listen to the show actually walk away with ideas that they can implement in their own lives. So it's not just one of those sort of celebrity nostalgia conversations. There's a whole other level there of what it takes to get what you want in life. And each person that I speak to has gems of information.
Yeah. And all of the people, too, that you're speaking with have moved on to amazing things elsewhere. You know, that Much Music wasn't the pinnacle, you know, or the be all and end all for those people. They've all had great careers beyond.
Not necessarily. Not all of them have had great careers. Some of them had interesting lives. So it's also the idea of redefining success.
Right.
Because a lot of them have pursued what they love to do, which may not be in the public eye, which may not be earning a lot of money. It may appear like they're going downhill, but in fact, they're doing just what they want to do.
Right.
So that's a really important message for people to hear, is that fame is not, and broadcast is not the end all be all. That's just one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, maybe that's a good place to leave off with our chat, you know, talking about living well. I wish you all the best with this chapter, with the reinvention of the VJ. I suggest that people go check that out, and everything else that you set your heart to working on in the future, and all the best to you and your family during these difficult times. Thank you so much. Thanks. And it was great. The conversation was really interesting. So thanks for having me on as a guest. I really appreciate that. I was looking forward to chatting with you for a long time, and I'm glad that we got a chance to do this again. The third time we've chatted. Wow. So take care, Erica. And thank you again. There you have it, my conversation with the one and only Erica M. Also, thanks again to Mr. Jerry Stamp, who wrote and performed the Cool Story theme song and all other jingles and stings that appear on the show. Do yourselves a favor and look for Jerry's music wherever you stream. And finally, thank you for listening. Until next time, pura vida.
Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?